I'm Finn Graves and I'm in my home studio, and today we're going to talk about finding your voice as an artist. And part of the process of finding your voice is allowing time to pass. And now we're going to talk about finding your voice as an artist who works on art for yourself, not as a professional artist. Those are different conversations. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment, let me know about topics that you're interested in talking about, and let's get started. Okay, so one of the first things that I recommend to people when they come and they ask me, like, how did you become so Finn in your quality of work, is I actually recommend they begin a journaling practice. My beginning Bible that I give every human, the book of creative theology that I recommend deeply, is The Artist's Way by Julie Cameron. She lays out the entire beginning process. There's my puppy. She lays out the entire beginning process of getting all of that early gunk out. So when you're looking to find your voice as an artist, there's this feeling and this need of having to be proficient, of having to be talented, of having to be good. And I feel like one of the main differences between amateur artists and professional artists is that professional artists, we know we're winging it, and amateur artists are desperate to be professional. So my first recommendation, number one, is to begin a journaling practice. I love college ruled composition notebooks. Those are my jam. But I also, let me see if I can reach it over here. I also have a tendency to carry around little notebooks for creative ideas that I think are really interesting or fun. I am a notebook queen. I have thoughts and concepts and I write things down all the time. And so how you begin your journaling practice is in the morning when you wake up with your coffee, you sit down and you write 3 pages longhand, and you write about bullshit. You brain dump, you put down ideas you want to try, you put down things you want to learn, and that gets you well on that discovery. I began The Artist's Way when I was 14 years old, and I wasn't able to really put into action all of the things from that book until I was about 19. Now, bear in mind that I pretty much came out of the womb with a pen in hand. I immediately began coloring and drawing and hanging out with animals. That was the thing that I did, and telling stories and reading stories. So that actually leads to the second concept. In Julie Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, she mentions that not to bother to go back and reread your work. I actually deeply disagree, but that is because I have volumes of my work. I've kept everything since I was 19 years old on, and I've kept some of my teenage journals just because they are aesthetically appealing to me or they seemed worthwhile. But however, I have burned some of them. I have a tendency to, once something has completed, do you hear my dog? She's eating a bone right now. Can I have that? Thank you. It's too loud, love. So once I was able to put into action that 3 pages of longhand a day, my ability to express myself as an artist grew exponentially. Now, the second thing that I think is the most important is to keep a sketchbook. I love my sketchbooks, and I recommend that people keep one. I have a solid level of ADHD, and so I like to separate things into different categories. Be like, I'm gonna write this one at this time, and this one and this time, and this one and this time. But the one thing I never deviate from is those 3 pages every morning of longhand for my journal. And so in my sketchbooks, I always have one that's going, and I call them junk sketchbooks. So this is the place where you put all the bad crap. There's this old artist adage that says you have to make enough bad work to be able to create good work. And so the level of bad work, you're supposed to put in 10,000 hours or enough that's as tall as you are. And I'm 5'8", so that's a lot of bad work. And if I feel like if I stacked all my sketchbooks to the ceiling, I think they would make 8 feet, you know? And that's not counting like the ones that I've burned. That's counting the ones that I have. Hey, Mama's recording. Do you want to be able to be in here, or do you want to go somewhere else? Having a monster is like having a toddler. Oh my goodness. Okay, so number 2, keep a sketchbook. Thanks for bearing with me. I like it when they're with me in the studio, and I kind of want my videos to be off the cuff and conversational. And so part of that process is just allowing things to happen the way that they do. Okay, so number 3, after you have been keeping a journal, writing 3 pages, I would say minimum 5 days a week. Give yourself a year. Like, realize that finding your voice as an artist is all about my 3rd favorite thing, experimentation. And so when you're going out and you're looking for things, Julie Cameron, she says also to take yourself on weekly artist dates. And those are phenomenal. Like, give yourself a budget and go out and experiment with the material. If you're super into like needle felting, pick up the materials for needle felting and like practice it and like see how it feels. If you're super into story writing, like write flash fiction, you know, write bad poetry, write concepts like this. If you're super into painting, sit down and get like a massive amount at the Christmas sales of like canvases and just paint bad paintings and then release them. You can drop them off at Goodwill, or you can repaint over them. I'm a proponent of painting over the top of things. This thing has been painted over. It is actually, this piece is acrylic over top of oil, which one should never do, but it's called complicated grief. And so the process, so what happens with the acrylic, the reason you can't paint over oil is because oil is an oil-based medium, right? And acrylic is plastic, and plastic can slide. And so it will slide and crackle and crumple. But because grief is one of those things, grief is actually stated as like a mental health diagnosis. However, it's one that ends. And so that concept of it decaying away is delightful to my brain. So I think that those are like some of the biggest things. Give yourself a year. Number 1, just give yourself a year. You're not gonna find the voice of who you're going to be. Sorry, she was growling. You're not gonna find the voice of who you're gonna be until you become who you're going to be. And a lot of that work is, number 1, listening to yourself. You know how it feels when a friend sits down and listens to you and just really appreciates you and just takes the time to experience what you're saying, and they're not like waiting to say something in return, right? They're just listening to you. They're open to the concept. They're open to the things that you're sharing with them. I feel very much like that. 3 pages of journaling in the morning. They're called morning pages, and you can look those up. Like, everybody does a thing on morning pages. So it's a pretty regular proponent of artist lives and creatives lives. Creative lives. Let's say words of lives. Like I said, off the cuff kind of things. And one of the things that does is it not only, it shows you the voice that you write with. And so you have a specific writing voice, and your writing voice will develop over time. And I know if you're like a visual artist, or you want to be a visual artist, you're like, why is this useful for me? It's useful because you're going to have to talk about your work. I mean, you just heard how I talked about complicated grief, right? Like, I wouldn't have been able to put that into words if I hadn't journaled and thought about it and experienced it. Like, concepts behind art is actually really important. People will say a lot of times, oh, here, like, I'll hold this up. It's an abstract piece, you know, like, it's called Storm, and you're supposed to experience it. And now with a simple 1-letter word like that, you could experience this and be like, okay, I see the chaos, you know, I see like global warming happening, and then all the water being dredged up from the earth and it coming out as rain, and then everything's melting away. But the only reason I could come up with that off of my palette, this is my palette, not a painting, is because I have the words and the education, and I've spent the time with those things. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you? If you need more clarification, obviously, leave me a comment. And so having a voice, like literally finding your visual voice, the way that you want to represent things in the world, is it's crucial and it's interesting. And the way that you write, the way that you speak, it's a dialect and nobody's gonna sound like you, which I think is really cool. And number 2, that sketchbook full of junk. Let it be junk. Let your sketchbooks be full of junk. Fill them up as fast as possible. Just like let that process be part of your experience. Because making bad art, you're never gonna stop making bad art. I find if I make art all week, if I make one piece that's good art, that's amazing. As a photographer, when I'm filming videos I keep more like 15% of the work that I do because it's so much effort that I just keep it and I upload it raw form like this. However, with photography, I delete 95% of the photographs I take. I just delete them. I love Digital World for that because when I learned photography, I was definitely on a manual camera. Like I definitely did the like printing it out in dark rooms, and one of my oldest friends actually came from that experience. He was my TA during that time. Anyways, other stories. But just like fill up those sketchbooks. Try any medium you want. Because number 3, experimentation. Like do that experimentation. Give yourself that time. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to let her chew on her bone because we have now, do you see it? It's gross. It's gross. She is very excited about it though. It is a hoof. She's a monster and so she can really consume said things. But that experimentation time allows you to develop and just enjoy yourself and appreciate the fact that you're a baby. I am an emerging artist. I'm over 20 years into my career. Now, my ADHD is strong, and so that makes me like a jack of all trades and a master of none. And that's my trajectory. That's my path as an artist. A lot of people are emerging artists though for a minimum of about 10 years. And so that process of being an emerging artist versus being an established artist is a different trajectory for everyone else. So if you're at the beginning parts, just enjoy the beginning parts. Begin and have fun. Okay. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me for about 15 minutes. 15-minute artist talks seem about right. I'm gonna go and do something else. Which is actually how I leave most conversations. I'll be like, I'm gonna go do something else. Bye. If I could make Jim Carrey accents, I would, but that is not in my strong suit. So hit the subscribe, hit the like button, leave comments if you enjoyed this random little artist talk, and I'll see you next week.